Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. And what you're about to see is a pre-recorded training session we did over in the United States. But be assured that a lot of the material that we cover is really applicable to any automotive application. So just be aware that yes, it is a lot of North American vehicles, but they will apply a lot of the same principles apply over in the UK as well. Now, if you do have any questions, if you're watching this during the premiere, you can just leave it in the chat. We'll be monitoring live chat. If you're watching this after the premiere, then just feel free to leave a comment underneath the video and we'll get to those as we can as well. So my name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's diagnostic technical trainers. I've been in the training department since 2013, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple years as a diagnostic sales rep at Snap-on, so I had 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before I did that, it was 8 years at Subaru, so I worked in a dealership, and over time, I guess, just became the default diag guy in the shop. So I always ended up having the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my bed. Then before that, bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today is continuing our OEM specific training that we've been doing this year. And tonight's manufacturer is Honda. So we're going to talk through what makes Honda vehicles unique in the marketplace, a few little tips and tricks, things that are unique about maybe scan tool functions. And we'll, of course, do our dive into what the data tells us about what common failures are in those vehicles as well. Well, first off, let's start with some history. So it was started by Soichiro Honda, who began working as a mechanic tuning race cars in his teens and 20s. Then in 1937, he began a company producing piston rings, and that actually really didn't go very well as a first jaunt into the world there, because they were not that good. So actually, he worked with Toyota and partnered with them to try and make everything better, and adopted a lot of Toyota's work practices and so on, and worked with them throughout World War II. Then in 1946, he founded the Honda Technical Research Institute, and he began by producing motorized bicycles, so not motorcycles. Had a bunch of spare engines left over, some little engines left over after the war, and started making chain drive, motorized, just regular bicycles with a motor. Ended up producing their first complete motorcycle in 1949 and then became the largest motorcycle producer by 1964. They produced their first automobile in 1963, pictured here, the T360 mini pickup truck. Just one of those very small two-seater in the front, got a tiny bed in the back, but it's enough to, carry a little bit of stuff. And they've been, of course, been making cars and motor vehicles ever since. Now they launched the Acura brand in 1986, and I know that's pretty much in North America only. Really, outside of there, it's Honda everything. But in 1991, though, released the Acura NSX, which was their mid-engine supercar V6 with VTEC. So that was one of the first iterations of that VTEC, the variable valve lift timing and electronic control, that they still use today. I'm sure it's been improved upon along the way, of course, but that's the first time it really showed up in a production vehicle was 1991, and I know that was always, through the teen years and early 20s, that was a big deal, with all the Fast and Furious movies and all that. Everybody always talk about VTEC this, VTEC that with Honda. So that was a big improvement and able to make these small displacement engines actually make more power than they normally could. Kept putting along and reached 1 million US sales in 1998. And now, of course, they've pressed it over that. And now they produce not just gasoline vehicles, but also hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which we'll talk about briefly in a little bit. So as far as the top models sales-wise, this is going to be North American numbers. Over the last 10 or so years, 2013 through 2023. So the number one vehicle is a CRV. With almost 4 million units sold, 3.7 million, followed closely by the Civic and the Accord, all over 3 million units apiece. And then we get down, it drops off fairly significantly from there, as you'll notice. down to the first Acura down here at MDX. I put Acura and Honda in there just to see kind of where the sales numbers fell. So the MDX is their SUV there. And it's a little over almost 600,000 units, all the way down to the TLX was the number 10 at 269,171. All told in 10 years, 14,985,000 and change on the sales. That's about almost 1.5 million vehicles a year. So not bad for North America. And that's just North America. Elsewhere in the world, there's, of course, more other sales. So picking some representative models is what I meant to say. 2019 CRV, that was kind of the high mark over that 10-year period as the most sales. And, they're fairly prevalent out there on the road. You can't pretty much go really anywhere without seeing some CRVs on the road. In this case, it was the 5th generation of the CRV, a 1.5 liter turbo available and a 2.4 liter naturally aspirated engine as well. And this one, you can have any transmission you want as long as it's a CVT. Only one version of transmission in those. Next one's the 17 Civic. So on that, this is the 10th generation of the Civic in this case. Been around since the 70s, really. So the 10th generation. 1.5 liter and 2.0 liter naturally aspirated engines are available. CVT transmission, once again, any transmission you want as long as it's CVT. This was the first generation, though, based on the Honda Global platform. So that's when they kind of homogenized their platform across the board. So if you bought a Civic in England, you bought a Civic in Australia, you bought a Civic in Japan, bought a Civic in the United States, they're all going to have the same underpinning. Pretty much going to have the same engine, same transmission, same suspension and all that. Just a steering wheel. Might swap sides, but that's really going to be your only difference between them. So it's the Honda Global platform. And a lot of manufacturers you've seen, do this to save costs. So I don't have to do 10 different types of platforms. I can just do one that works for many vehicles worldwide. And then it's the second best-selling car in North America behind the Toyota Camry. Of course, the CRV is a SUV, so that doesn't count. So Civic is a second best-selling car in North America behind the Toyota. And then we have our one Acura. I figured I'd add that on the list as well, since it's kind of a Honda and Acura theme here. 2014 Acura MDX was the high water mark for that. 3rd generation, because Acura as a brand has only been around since '96, as we said earlier. So the 2014 MDX was the 3rd generation of that. It was available with 3.5 liter naturally aspirated V6 engine only, and that's the same V6 they use across the board. Anytime there is a 3.5 liter V6, it's going to be that one. And in this case, no CVT option. It's actually a 6-speed automatic transmission. You'll notice no standard transmission option, and as we know, that's becoming fewer and further between as we progress through the ages here. So common issues. So the thing about Honda, and I'm sure the reputation precedes this, and I'm not the first one to tell you this, but Hondas in general as a brand are fairly reliable. One of the more reliable automakers out there. Between them and Toyota, it's a very reliable vehicle. So not a lot of really weird oddball issues out there. You're going to have some commonality, of course, just like any other vehicle is going to, once you parse out the data, it's going to have the same type of issues. But in this case, valve train issues, so like VTEC problems, because, well, they're really the only engine that has the VTEC system on it. So if I'm going to have a problem with that, then it's just going to pop up, right? So valve train between the valve control and then also cam signals, things like that. Catalytic converters, pretty much just like any vehicle on the road nowadays, uses a fair number of cat problems out there as we're leaning out the mixtures in these automobiles to make better gas mileage numbers. That's just gonna happen. And evap issues, since it's so tightly monitored, the evap emissions, that you're gonna get, even the slightest little pinhole can cause a code on a vehicle. So you're gonna see a lot of evap issues, a lot of cat codes. Things of that nature. By and large, other than that, no real off-the-wall things have come up in the research here to see, what the weird things are. Some common codes as well. As we said, we have a list of like the top 3,000, 3,600, something like that codes that get brought up on our tool. And we rank them by brand and so on. So Honda, Acura didn't even make it to the list of the top 10 codes. But the 3.5-liter engine shows up a couple times. The 2.4-liter engine shows up the rest of the time. And it's things like VPS stuck off, so that would be your variable timing. VTEC system malfunction, VPS again. VTEC pressure solenoid is actually what that is. So a couple of those, and those are both on the 3.5-liter. And then cat code, crank sensors, cam sensors, catalyst efficiency again. So you see a lot of the same type of codes popping up all the time. That's where I kind of drew that conclusion where that's going to be your common issues there. And you see a lot of CRVs because most common vehicle out there as far as Honda is concerned. So the data is starting to paint us a picture here, right? Some OEM specific features. So as I said before, VTEC is kind of their calling card, their hallmark that they invented and patented and all that. So that it is their way of changing valve duration and lift by using mechanical differences in the camshaft. So the camshaft on each cylinder is going to have 3 lobes. You're going to have your low lift cam lobes, which one rides on each of the valves because it's overhead cam. And then the high lift cam lobe is going to be in the middle, and we're going to use the rocker arms and some pins and some oil pressure to make it all work together. So this is what the camshaft looks like as you see. A low profile and a higher profile is going to be 2 different, your high lift VTEC and your low regular driving around most of the time lift. And a lot of it comes down to the rocker system in this and how it operates. So we have 3 rockers for every pair of valve because we have those 3 lobes on the cams. And a lot of it has to do with these springs and these pistons right here. So the pistons go through each of those rockers and locks them together when the oil pressure comes in, which allows it to only ride on the high lift cam. When the oil pressure goes away, the spring pushes them out, and then it lines up. So the low lift rockers work, and the high lift just kind of sits there idle. So it just kind of works both ways, and it's controlled by the oil control valve. So this is a simple solenoid. It opens and closes as to whether or not it wants the oil to flow or it doesn't want the oil to flow. Very, very simple in design. Also has an oil pressure switch on USA and Canada models as well. Just for a little extra observation of what's going on, I guess. So here's how it works. On the low cam, like I said, it's going to follow the low lift cam lobes, and then we have the spring and the pistons in here. So these dowel pins, basically, is what I would call. On the low lift, that's on the 2 on the outside, and you'll notice that the gap between the rockers is going to line up with these splits inside the pistons. So this is really just kind of freewheeling in there. It's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. It's just following the cam. Yes, but it's not pushing anything down. The low lift will be pushing on these 2 rockers and pushing down the valves. However, if I want to go to high lift operation, it opens up the valve and it pushes in oil on one side, which pushes these overrides the return spring. And you'll notice now that the cuts in those pistons are now within that 3rd rocker. So now it's basically all one unit tied together with these pins. So it's going to be forced to follow that high cam lobe, these low cam lobes. So it's going to push down further, and it's almost like the outsides aren't going to touch now because the lift isn't. So it's going to be pushing on the center. It's fairly simple in idea. Making it work, requires good oil pressure and all that good stuff. Make sure all the solenoids are working and everything mechanically is working okay. It is oil pressure actuated, so there's not as many failure points, but still. Fairly simplistic system. Other manufacturers use similar ideas as this, but hey, they were the originator, right? So credit where due. Another thing that they do that's not necessarily unique to Honda, but unique in the way that they do it is displacement on demand. So we've seen in other manufacturers how they can shut off individual cylinders or banks of cylinders or what have you, in order for it to decrease fuel or increase fuel economy, decrease fuel consumption. So in this case, on the Honda, on the 6 cylinders, we can turn off either 2 cylinders or 3 cylinders or an entire bank, right? So we can either one in each bank to give us 4-cylinder operation, or an entire bank that gets us 3-cylinder operation, all the way down to 3 cylinders. So here's how it works. This is a 6-cylinder operation, so everything's going to be together. So we have the all these little pins are going to push into the rockers. and that's going to hold the rockers. It also has VTEC on this as well, so it's another set of oil. But we have the rocker arms, turning them on and off even with the oil pressure. So that's normal operation. All the pins are pushed over. On 4-cylinder operation, it's going to run down a different channel with these oil control valves. And notice how on this 1-cylinder here, number 3, and then I guess it would be 6 on the other side, on the other bank, would be turned off because the oil pressure is pushing this over. So now those rockers are just kind of freewheeling again. They don't have anything pushing on them. They're just sitting there. The valves are closed, right? The valve springs are going to hold it closed. And you can see how the oil pressure kind of overrides that. But these pins, the spring is pushing them in and locking them in. So it unlocks them, and then they just kind of sit there. The valves close, and then those cylinders are effectively off. They also turn off the injector and ignition. On 3-cylinder operation, it's going to do that same thing just for the entire bank. So you can see oil pressure going into each of the cavities, overriding the spring, pushing the spring in, and that whole bank is just, the valves are just going to be sealed shut. So then they won't, won't be burning any fuel or anything. So I'd imagine there must be a way to relieve the compressions. Maybe it opens a little. But for in all intents and purposes, they're off. Those cylinders are off. So that's how it can variably go from a 6-cylinder, a 4-cylinder, or a 3-cylinder, just by using oil pressure in different oil passages and pins. Interesting concept. Now, tips from a tech, and this is usually where we do the, hey, this is this really weird off-the-wall thing that you might not necessarily think of, or you might misdiagnose because X. And every time I've seen this, 9 times out of 10, this is what solves the problem. As I said, Honda's, as a brand, fairly reliable. So not a lot of these stories floating around. I mean, I looked, not a lot of stories floating around, but one that personally happened to me. And actually, it personally happened to Keith as well. So I know a few people that this has happened to, and I'm sure this is a constant issue. I don't know if I want to call it an issue, but it's a design flaw, I guess, maybe, in the way that they actually have their ABS units up. So this was actually found inside our troubleshooter, which is built inside the scan tool under ABS, and the category is VSA light stays on after repair, so vehicle stability assistance. So text in the field report VSA light will stay on and may have a code 84 stored as well after replacing ABS or VSA modulator or clearing stored VSA system DTCs or after performing brake repairs. So if I do the brakes, if I clear the code, so this is probably the most prevalent when I do a full system code clear. Clears all the codes in the car, and then all of a sudden I turn the car on and the light is on. Well, why is the light on? I cleared the codes. Why is the light on? Do I have a problem? Maybe I have this code 84 in there, right? So VSA sensor neutral memorization procedure must be completed after the modulator assembly is replaced or cleared codes or completing brake-related repairs that may have caused the light to stay on. So if the light comes on, it needs to do this relearn. Now, it's an automated relearn, but you might not know. So it says the procedures outlined under test and procedures test apart. Yet another troubleshooter article. So the ABS starts performing a self-test when the key is switched to the on position, key on, engine off. After the engine is started and the driver accelerates above 6 miles an hour, the ABS pump will cycle for about a second. Noise is reported as a buzz or a moan. It's going to be like a noise. After the self-test is complete, the ABS light will turn off. So really, if you clear the codes and you do the one touch code clear and you clear all the codes and the light is still on, drive it out of the parking lot and back in. Really, so you got to get over 6 miles an hour. Once you've done that and the pump buzzes, then the self-test is complete and you should be good to go in that case. So that's just kind of like I said, it happened to me. Talked to Keith about it like a week ago. It happened to him too. Talked to a bunch of other techs in the field. That's happened as well. So that is definitely one that you can hang your hat on. Probably only going to happen to you once unless you don't read through how to do it. But it's only going to get you once, like I said, unless you read through how to fix it. It might get you again. But that article is right there within the tool. Now, as far as OEM specific functions, not a lot of complexity when it comes to these vehicles. So unlike some other vehicles we've gone through where they have like all this automated sensors and switches and different things for like variable intakes and stuff like that, they don't have as much of that. So there's not as many vehicle specific, make specific tests. But since we do have VTech, VTech does have an automated test in there to test the VTech components. VTC, which is going to be the variable timing control test, and crank position pattern learning. So crank position pattern learning be after I do any work on the timing system, crank sensor, cam sensor. It's going to relearn the crank. Now, as far as the VTC test, it's going to activate the VTC valve to 3 stages and monitors each position from input voltage of the cam sensor input against target angle commanded by the ECM and the PCM. There can be a difference between actual angle and the target of 3 to 5 degrees. The purpose of this test is to duplicate a VTC system failure. This test will not execute if any other codes are set, and then there's a bunch of parameters that you have to meet to do. So it's basically going to duplicate what happens when the system fails, so help you with diagnostics from there. Transmission-related tests, since it is a CVT, we're going to have a CVT learning value reset. A lot of manufacturers out there with the learning of the shift points and such with the newer transmissions learns how you drive, so to say. And if I do any sort of work like replace the TCM or the valve body or valve body work or internal work, I need to reset that value. Some other tests that are available. So the brake pad maintenance mode, that's especially important when I have to replace my brake pads. And then ADAS. This one's kind of interesting. I think this was fairly new. We added the dynamic aspect of it. But you can either aim the camera statically with targets and such and have to have the distance in the shop and such, or dynamic, which is driving down the road. So it's going to give you all of the parameters here for how you're going to do that with that. So we can have a static or a dynamic camera aiming, which is nice. Not every manufacturer does that. It's usually either static or dynamic, and they don't usually allow you. So that's helpful. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this while I was researching. This came up in my search result. Next year, 2025 model year, they are releasing a CRV with a fuel cell engine. So it is a this is like all the things, right? So it's a plug-in hybrid, fuel cell powered electric vehicle. So EFCEV. So the engine is powered by hydrogen, so it's a hydrogen fuel cell. Takes place of the internal combustion, gasoline engine. But it also has a plug-in, and it also has the battery. So their way of thinking is, well, if I'm just putting around town running errands and stuff like that, I'm probably just going to use the electric part, so I can plug it in, and I'm going to use the electric part. If I need longer range, if I need to go a further distance, I need to charge the battery. Then it will initiate the fuel cell engine to charge up the battery and actually make the vehicle go down the road. Now, of course, the nice thing about hydrogen is that the emissions are water, and that's pretty much it. So no bad stuff coming out of the tailpipe with that. So honestly, other people I've talked to in the industry, we're leaning towards this is probably the way it's going to go, because Honda's going in actually very big. If you think about that, that's their top selling model. And they're making an option to have the fuel cell vehicle. Because fully electric, I think we know especially over the past 5-6 years, we've noticed there's some shortcomings here and there, and there aren't the infrastructure is not necessarily there either. Definitely not to say that there's infrastructure for hydrogen, but that it is out there, and of course it can be built up, and you can get it from water, the ocean, really. So definitely a plentiful supply of hydrogen out there. So this may be the way that things go. Hybrid vehicles for sure, and then hydrogen-powered hybrid vehicles. Hey, that sounds good to me. Toyota has also been working on a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle as well. So if your top 2 fairly high-selling automakers that have a good reputation for quality are going out there to mass market with these, it could be coming sooner than you think. Now, I also would want to mention that there has been a fuel cell vehicle on the market for at least a few years, Honda Clarity. So I don't know how many they've sold of these because I don't have sales numbers on that. But I can't imagine it's a ton, but started in 2017 and ended in 21. So that was what, a 4-year span of selling a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle to the general public in the mass market. So 69 miles to the gallon city, MPGe, right? So it does have a battery in it, and it also has the fuel cell as well. 366-mile range with the fuel cell. That's pretty good. So let's talk about the coverage we actually have for this vehicle, because a lot of folks don't know that we actually cover this within the scan tool as well. So that's the first stop we're going to make on our live walkthrough. So pull this up. And that'll be the first one I'm going to pull up. So 2017 Clarity in the scanner. And you can see, of course, we don't have engine because it doesn't have a traditional engine. But if we come down here, if you think about it, why wouldn't we have coverage on it? Because it's going to have all the other things that a car is going to have, like integrated driving support systems, cameras and radars and stuff, keyless entry, body control, door locks, HVAC and stuff. But then we come down to hybrid electric vehicle, things like the fuel cell. All right, so we can come in here in different functional tests. We got a high voltage battery fan test, electric water pump test, cooling fan test. If I come to adjustments, there's a coolant air bleeding, so the coolant that cools off the system. We need to bleed the air out of that, so there's an automated bleed for that as well. Plus some data. If I go into data, fuel cell, electric water pumps, hydrogen injection, purge mode, tank vent mode, cathodes, anodes, that sort of thing. So all of this data that you would need in order to diagnose the issues within that fuel cell, the data is here. It's available in our scan tool. It's kind of neat. Now, I didn't do this on the last class. I'm going to do it on this class. So I just want to see, just for sheer curiosity, how many of these records we have. It's not going to be many. I'm going to tell you that right now. I just want to see where we, yeah, 7, 7 repairs. And this hybrid battery has been quite a bit of the, battery, wheels, axle shafts. So it's nothing major. Hybrid battery is the number one search. Coolant, hybrid electric vehicle, right? So yeah, you're going to see that type of thing with a hybrid vehicle. I didn't think there was going to be very many. I'm actually surprised there's even 7. But hey, that's wonderful that we have that data too, because I can't imagine they sold a lot. All right, let's go to the CRV. Take a look in the scanner, and I will tell you, as far as the gasoline engine vehicles that we're talking about, the functional tests are pretty much going to be the same as far as functions and special functions. So in this case, I got to wait 10 seconds for it to populate the list. All right, and this says on the hybrid vehicles, you need to put an engine maintenance mode in order for the engine test to work, which makes sense because it might not necessarily fire up right away. Electronic throttle control system. There's the VTC for the variable timing control, and then the VTEC test as well. Idle stop start counters, such. Special functions. Gotta wait 5 seconds on this one. And that's going to be things like crank pattern learning we talked about, throttle position learning, if I do anything with the throttle system, shipping mode, eco drive, etc. So a couple different things in here. I mean, like I said, it's not a ton of esoteric resets and relearns because they just don't, they're not that complicated. But let's look at repair information. Logged in too many times. Let's just log out a bunch of times. All right. So we're going to pull this up. 176,000 repairs based on this, based on our 2.7 billion repairs that we have. 176,068 showed up with the 2019 CRV with the 2.4. Normal things, pads and rotors, batteries, that's fairly common. Tire valve stems to go with the wheels. Tire pressure monitoring system, maybe related to the wheels as well. Brake calipers, that seems a little high on the list to be in the top 10. If we look at the codes though, evap, evap, evap. Then we got a couple misfires, lean, crank position, one oddball transmission fluid pressure knock sensor. That one's a little high too. Maybe they use the same knock sensors as Subaru did because there's a lot of replacements on those. Engine doesn't start, noise heard from brakes, TPMS light on, etc. Oil life reset. That's folks who have actually searched for stuff manually through here. So oil life reset, brake rotors, that sort of thing. So I actually can do a lot of that through the scan tool as well. So that's the CRV. Let's go with the Civic. Like I said, the Civic, the scan tool functions are going to be pretty much the same because they only use a few different engine models. So the functional tests are going to be the same. The special functions are going to be the same. So going to be listed the same way. Let's look into our sure track info. So 23,000 repairs on the 1.5 liter engine, and we can see, wheels, brakes, pads, and rotors. AC refrigerant, though, that seems a little. AC and up, the number one symptom, that seems high. A lot of misfires, turbocharger problem, system too lean, evap again. So that's a lot of those codes related to that 1.5 liter turbo. If I change my engine, though, if I go to the 2 liter, 111,000 repairs. So the 2 liter is obviously way more common. It's going to be a lot of the same stuff in this category because the body doesn't change, the actual chassis doesn't change. AC refrigerant is still pretty high up, though. AC inoperative still number one. Evap again, bunch of misfires, evap, misfire. That's a transmission code, too rich thermostat, right? So a lot of misfires on that one, and evap problems, like I said. Even though, I mean, for 111,000 occurrences of repairs, 36 times is the number one code. Not a lot of issues with these cars, as I said. Very well, very reliable, as it would be, and the data backs it up. Last vehicle, we're going to go with the MDX. And this one doesn't have nearly as many, of course, because it has not nearly as many of the sales as well. It's like almost 600,000 sales over 10 years. So we'll pull in here and disc brake pads and rotors, wheels, spark plugs, struts. That seems kind of high. Struts over here on number 4 as well. So maybe a lot of strut failures on those. Noise heard, engine overheats, noise heard. Throttle actuator number 1. That's kind of interesting. So that's the throttle body actuator. Cat code, rocker arms. So that's in the VTEC system. A lot of the V6 with the VTEC system seems to have more issues than others. System too lean, evap, a lot of evap issues. Again, cat codes and evap issues in there. And then a few noises and stuff, but nothing that really jumps out. And once again, 55,000 repairs, 140 instances of one code. So maybe they just have, actually, let's pull that up, see if there's a TSB on it. Maybe there is. I don't know. I haven't checked. No TSBs for it. Figured there might be a TSB for the throttle. Let's just look in the technical bulletins as well, just to see. That's under engine control systems. Not right off the top of the head as to whether it's a throttle system. So yeah, figured you might try with it, right? So yeah, that is Honda. Hopefully you picked up on a few little tips and tricks. I know that clearing the VTC light is kind of important on that, or VSA light, sorry. VSA light, very important on that. Plus, the VTEC system. Having a better understanding of how that works can help you when you're diagnosing some weird drivability problems that might be drivetrain related as well. So that is Honda. And with that, that is our time here today. So make sure you tune in for new diagnostic content every week. We will be premiering a new video every Wednesday at 7 p.m. UK time. So make sure you check it out on the YouTube channel. If you're watching, of course, you would be watching this on YouTube, but make sure you subscribe, thumbs up, ring the little notification bell so you know anytime we post new content. And it's youtube.com/SnapOnDiagnosticsUK. With that, time for questions. If you have any questions, just feel free. Once again, if you're watching this on a premiere, just leave it in the live chat and we'll answer those. Otherwise, leave a comment under the video and we will get to those as we monitor those comments as well. So I'd like to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to learning a little bit more about how you might be able to be more efficient at diagnosing vehicles using some of the information that we've given you today. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Hopefully you can watch and see you on any of our other videos. Have a good week. Have a good night and take care.